Hey everybody, the topic of the day today is Sotol. So, Sotol is a spirit made in Mexico, and actually, it's the odd one out of this series because although it is part of the Agave series, Sotol itself is not actually an agave plant. So, just to make that clear, although it is part of this Agave series, the plant itself, it isn't strictly an agave, but it does as a result of fermentation and distillation, give off very similar qualities to the agave spirits we've already mentioned. So the Sotol plant, which is used to make Sotol, it is like an agave in the sense that it does take years and years to grow. In fact, it actually takes longer than the blue Weber agave that I mentioned for tequila, which can take, between 7 and 10 years. To get a fully kind of matured Sotol, you need about 15 years. So as you can imagine, this is quite a big process, a timely process to actually make Sotol because you need to wait a long time before these plants have reached the right stage. But then once the plants are chopped down and they are fermented and distilled in the same way as the agaves are for tequila, you chop down the plant, you bake it, and then you ferment and distill. Once that's been done, the spirit itself isn't that different to tequila. There'll be very earthy flavours, but what's really interesting about the Sotol plant is that depending on what's planted close to it, it can take characteristics from nearby plants that are being kind of farmed or grown. So, for example, if you had a chilli plant near a Sotol that was growing, you might find that the Sotol spirit had spicy elements to it. If you were growing flowers near the Sotol plant, you might find that the finished spirit has more floral aromas. I know it sounds really crazy, but it is actually true that they take on the influence of nearby kind of plants. So that's why it's really interesting with Sotol, because some producers do choose to actually farm the plants very kind of systematically, whereas some producers they basically collect wild Sotol plants. So it's really interesting because it can result in all kinds of different finished spirits. It's very, very hard to get consistency, which is why of all the spirits that I've discussed this week, this is probably the one that I would describe as really the most artisanal and rustic and small batch. And this isn't the kind of spirit that you hear about being made by like big producers like Diageo, Even Del Maguey, which has been bought by Pernod, that's strictly mezcal and doesn't include any Sotol in terms of the portfolio that Pernod bought. So when it comes to the actual flavour of this spirit, as I say, it can be really varied, but you can have herbaceous notes on the nose, on the palate. You can have quite creamy notes as well, like vanilla if it's been aged. Some producers do age the Sotol same as you would with tequila or mezcal. So you might buy a Reposado Sotol, which might have hints of vanilla because it's been in an oak barrel for, say, anywhere between 2 and 12 months, which is generally what is the rule for Reposado across tequila and mezcal as well. So it's really interesting. And like I said, one of the key features can be spiciness, like black pepper spices, or sometimes even sweet spices like cinnamon spices, because of this fact that there is a lot of variation in terms of how they can all be. So it's just something to look out for, like I said, if you're interested in learning more about Mexican spirits, because although, like I said, this is part of the Agave series, it should be considered more just a Mexican spirit, similar to its cousins, its agave spirit cousins, but it's not actually agave. All right, cheers, guys.